Welcome to your Artsy Girl podcast. I am your host, Christina Carrere. This is a podcast about art, poetry, and anything about creativity. Sit back, relax, and get your dose of brain food to get your creative juices flowing. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 11. Today, I have an interesting show because I have two featured guests, both at the same time and both from opposite ends of the world. Now, I'm in Florida, and I have Ivy Alvarez calling in from New Zealand, and I have Aileen Cassinetto calling in from San Mateo County in California. So this is very interesting because I have two very distinguished featured guests from two different parts of the world at the same time via Skype. So this is very cool to do. And what I'll do is begin Ivy Alvarez's bio and then Aileen Cassinetto's. Okay, so Ivy Alvarez is a Fellow of MacDowell Colony in the U.S. and Hawthornden in the UK. Her work is widely published and anthologized, including 2 appearances in the Best Australian Poemsseries, with poems translated into Russian, Spanish, Japanese, and Korean. She is a 3-time Pushcart Prize nominee and a recipient of grants from Creative New Zealand, Literature Wales, and the Australia Council for the Arts. She is also a mentor for the New Zealand Society of Authors Youth Mentorship Program, an editor for the NZ Poetry Society's magazine, A Fine Line, a guest co-editor for Verity Law's Discoursing Diaspora, and a former international editor for the first Aotearoa New Zealand edition of Atlanta Review. Born in the Philippines and raised in Australia, Ivy Alvarez lived in Scotland, Ireland, and Wales before moving to Auckland, New Zealand in 2014. Aileen Cassinetto is the 3rd Poet Laureate of San Mateo County, the first Asian American appointed to the post. She is the author of Traje de Boda, Meritage Press, 2010, and The Pink House of Purple Yam, Preserves and Other Poems, Our Own Voice, and Little Dove Books, 2018, as well as 3 chapbooks through Moria Books' acclaimed Locofo series. She is also co-publisher of Paloma Press, an independent literary press established in 2016. Please welcome Ivy Alvarez and Aileen Cassinetto. Hi, Ivy and Aileen. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Christina.
Hi, Christina.
Hi.
Thank you so much. And congratulations on your new book.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Congratulations, Christina.
Yeah.
Thank you. And well, I'd like to congratulate you both. I'd like to note Aileen Cassinetto is the publisher of Paloma Press, who has published Ivy Alvarez's new book of poetry entitled Diaspora. Aileen is the new Poet Laureate also of San Mateo County in California, and who just published her new book of poetry entitled The Pink House of Purple Yam, Preserves and Other Poems, which I am honored that she asked me to write her book blurb for her, and it appears on the back cover. So let's begin. Aileen, can you tell me, how did you start your independent book press for those who may think of starting one? And what is your mission statement and your future vision for Paloma Press?
Okay, so in 2015, I discovered the art of crafting and making books. My sister, who is an artist, and I initially worked on handmade books. We even started learning how to do letterpress printing. The idea was to create well-crafted and personalized books for 3 to 6-year-old kids. And then I tried to formalize the business and establish Paloma Press in 2016. It wasn't until 2017, though, that the focus shifted to publishing literary works. At that point, making handmade books was just not sustainable. So we turned to the print-on-demand model to be able to keep doing what we were doing. Mm-hmm. I also want to mention that Aileen Tabios guided Paloma Press in its early stages. She helped focus our vision and the direction we wanted to go. Even now, when I'm stumped on the business side of things, I send Aileen an SOS. She truly is a godsend. And at first, I just wanted to create beautiful books, and I wanted to publish books that I wish I had written. I feel very strongly that these books should be shared with a wider audience.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
how did you discover Ivy's new collection?
Oh, Ivy. So I worked with Ivy for about 2 years when I was associate editor of Our Own Voice. And Ivy, Ivy was the 2012
the magazine.
I remember that. Yes.
Yeah, and Ivy was the 2012 and 2013 resident poet. So so
they asked me back for the second year, which I was very honored to do.
Okay, so Our Own Voice, where is that? Is that located there by you?
No, so it's actually an online journal, and it was founded by Remé Grafalda, who is based in Virginia. Mm-hmm. And when I met Remé, I was living in Philadelphia. This was way back, I think, in 2003. Mm-hmm. So I want to mention that Ivy is one of those people you want to work with over and over. In Filipino, we call it hindi mabigat kasama, which means not a burden or easy to be with. So
thank you so much. Oh my God.
It's true. And so I collaborated with her again in 2017 for Paloma Press when we did the fundraising chapbook for hurricane displaced animals. And then in 2018, we agreed that we'll work on a volume of her diaspora collection.
Yes, you wrote me an invitation saying if I had anything that I could show to you, then I was welcome to do so. And I had just finished volume L and worked on it a bit and sent it to you, Aileen. And that's how it began.
And
that
so
is awesome.
7 years later, here we are promoting Ivy's book.
I know, and I see all the interesting interconnections in our literary community, because I'm familiar with, I've never met most of you all, but I know of, Remé Grafalda, because I guess when Luisa y Gloria had her Filipina American, remember that, the one that was in the Library of Congress?
Yes.
Mm. So I was a part of that, and I believe I had appeared on Our Own Voice too.
Yes.
So this is great. Wow. So Paloma Press started as a actual press, and you did children's books, and then you evolved with the guidance of fabulous Aileen Tabios.
The wonderful. Indefatigable.
Yes, and Aileen is also the godmother of Our Own Voice.
Okay. Yes, she has been in. I'm telling you. Was it? Who was it? The one that? Oh, it escapes me. But anyways, it just reminds me of back in Paris, France, when they had all those expats, and who had it was that the salon.
Yes.
That's what she reminds me. She's like, she connects everyone together, and does these fabulous projects, and she's always working on something. I know we're talking about Aileen.
I know, right?
But she's amazing.
I know. Okay, so Ivy, I read in your bio that you grew up in Australia, lived in Wales for about 10 years, and now have been living in New Zealand. How did traveling so widely and broadly happen for you?
Well, that was due to my relationship with my partner. Well, initially, of course, my mother moved to Australia, And so that's how my family and I ended there. Well, started there, I guess. And then through my relationship, we traveled. Before Wales, I actually was living in Scotland for about 6 months, and then Ireland for about a year. This was mostly, lucky happenstance and hard work and a combination of those things, finding places to live in where we could have a good life. And Wales was, the longest. But now I'm living in New Zealand. So, yes, after Wales. I don't know, my body couldn't handle the cold anymore.
So are you like in the warm part of New Zealand?
Yes, I'm in the North Island. So.
Okay, cool.
Yes, it's good. Yes.
Do you feel that you have, I don't know, a different perspective in the diaspora than, say, the poets from the United States? I mean, your work, you've mostly, Australia, and then, of course, in Europe, and now New Zealand. You're in a different region.
Yes. I feel that sort of traveling has allowed me to find strength in myself, resilience, being able to, knowing that I can uproot myself and find myself in a new place, and, having to make new friends, new homes, new relationships there. It's also given me a unique perspective in that, I'm an outsider, but I see that as a positive because I can see things about a place that other people just take for granted, and I can give a new perspective on that, I think.
Yeah, so, I mean, so you've met friends, and I'm sure artists, friends and writers, like in Europe and everything like that. So you have, that set of connections as opposed to, U.S. based who are primarily here. So that is interesting. I like the way you it's interesting that you bring that into the fold of Filipina, diaspora. And speaking of diaspora, why did you name your collection that? And what is exactly a fictionary? That's what you've in your preface said.
Oh, okay. Yes. I chose diaspora because I envision this volume L as to be the first of a set of volumes. So I wanted a title that was big enough to encompass that. And it felt like, because what I'm doing in the collection is responding to Filipino idioms. And, that seems writing poems in response to Filipino idioms. And so that seemed like it was coming from the perspective of, my life, moving around, and it wasn't just someone responding to the Philippines from, say, I don't know, one place. I was responding from multiple places because of having lived in so many countries. Right. So that was why I chose that. It felt right to me as soon as I decided on it. And I chose fictionary because I see it as a fictional dictionary. So
okay.
Push those two words together.
Fictional dictionary. And I love the way you you have the idiom, and then you actually put the literal,
Yes.
Because someone like me, I'm not fluent in Tagalog, but
me either.
No, you're not.
No.
Well, that's interesting. So because learning a language, it's hard to figure out what idioms are,
Absolutely.
And yes, that's the part of learning the language, right? And I'm always focused on the literal, meaning of it, because I'm trying to decipher the words, I know that one, but I learned quite a bit from just the idioms alone in your piece. And so, are you working from different personas as well in your pieces?
Yes, I am. There was a lot of shifting around, especially in volume L, which is the one that's just come out with Paloma Press. There's a lot of there's a couple of poems in there where I'm taking on the persona of maganda, beauty, and malakas.
Yes,
so
I read a poem about that also.
Right. Yeah. Okay. There you go. And I think what attracted me to the idioms was because as we just mentioned, I'm not fluent at all in Tagalog, Filipino. So this felt like a way of connecting to my origin culture. Mm-hmm. So, as well as learning something about myself, as well as trusting to intuition about how I feel about these idioms and, putting my current experience alongside something that I don't really have the connection that someone who has grown up with these idioms has.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yes. And like I said, it's wonderful collection. And who thought of the pictures in there? Is that from a particular
Aileen.
Place?
That's all Aileen's and her sister's.
Really?
Wonderful input.
Oh, okay.
Well,
you guys didn't draw it. You just had a concept of the images.
Yeah. So I think my sister chose vintage photos.
I love it.
That are in the public domain, and also some of Ivy's photos. And
yes,
I'm not sure really what program she used or how she manipulated the photos, but yeah, it's I've always wanted to do illustrated books, and it's and Ivy was pretty open to it, so
it goes well with it. Yes.
Yeah.
One image that really struck me was is the vintage one with the I guess it's a woman in the traditional dress, Tagalog dress, and she's looking in the mirror.
Oh yeah, that's my.
And then it's a picture of a Filipina, right? In like I don't know, I want to say like a Wonder Woman. Oh, Lorna.
Yeah. No, Darna.
Dorna.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not familiar. What's
N-A. She's a Filipino superhero.
I knew it was superhero type, like the Filipina Wonder Woman or something.
Yes.
Well, I had to make mention of that because that was powerful. That was very powerful. So I just want to shift. This question is now for Aileen. Okay. Aileen, can you tell us a little more about you and your growing up and your influences?
So I grew up in Manila during martial law. I wouldn't say that it was a terrible childhood, although it was very sheltered. I attended a Catholic school for girls. I grew up reading a lot of books, learning to play the piano, watching a lot of 1940s and 1950s Filipino films.
Oh,
I love those and I miss those. I don't know where to find them now. And also music by we had an old gramophone, and I remember growing up to Kundiman singers, and also Edward Elgar, Cole Porter, etc.
Interesting. So wait, hold on. So you grew up in the Philippines? You were born in the Philippines?
Mm-hmm.
And
I grew up in the Philippines.
And you grew up in the Philippines. How old were you when you came to the States?
Oh, I came here in 2000.
Oh, okay. So, yeah. So just recent then. Wow.
Yeah, very recent.
And you became Poet Laureate of San Mateo County.
Fantastic.
I know. That's great.
Yeah.
You just took over the world, you know?
No, it's just, I'm just very fortunate that I was mentored by incredible poets and artists, and also that I met a lot of people who kind of paved the way for me. Anyway, I wanted to mention I grew up on Japanese anime as well. Like, I don't know if you've heard of Baldur's 5 and Candy Candy. And then the government at the time banned them, and I was heartbroken. So anyway, so one of my earliest memories I was told you cannot just say anything that you want because a word can be deemed political, and that's dangerous during that time, even coming from a child. So I was always watching what I would say, and poetry kind of gave me the freedom to express myself. Although, there were also so many wonderful memories growing up in the Philippines, like Christmases and neighbors who were more like family.
Yeah.
And which is
so you grew up in Manila?
I did. I grew up in Quezon City, actually.
Oh, Quezon. Now, martial law. Now, I was a military child. My dad, we were stationed at Clark Air Force Base, and I remember martial law, and it has affected me also, and it has worked its way into my poetry, my writing as well. So I can totally relate to that aspect of it. So I recall a lot of the older Filipina and Filipino actor and actresses. Like I grew up, my mom watching Nora Honor, things like that. So that's interesting that you mentioned that. So I just want to also shift the conversation to both of you. I'm going to go ahead and ask you the same question. So for Ivy,
yes.
How did you know? Was there a pivotal moment that you kind of like knew that you wanted to be a poet?
Well, I guess, when I first started writing, I was actually interested in both fiction and poetry. Mm-hmm. But during university, I sort of suffered a setback with my short story writing, and I didn't win this prize that I really wanted. So I thought, no, I'll just give up and concentrate on poetry. And I think I really enjoyed the instant gratification you get from poetry. You just write.
I understand that. Yes.
and it's done relatively quickly compared with a short story. Mm-hmm. So, but it was during university. I think I said to myself, I want to see how far I go with this. I want to take this as far as I can go. So that was the start of it, I think. Yeah.
Have you thought about going back to short story or fiction?
Yes. I have been writing in the last couple of years. Yeah. I've sort of gravitated towards speculative fiction. So that's where, that was where I also began historical type short stories, So, it's interesting to return to it.
Very good. And so Ivy, what about you? When did you know?
I didn't consciously set out to become a poet. I gravitated towards creative writing in my early 20s when I became involved with a writers group whose members were these legendary poets and artists, most of whom were in exile in Europe because of their politics. They took me under their wing, and that's how I discovered that I liked writing poetry. Mm-hmm. And then in the early 2000s, I met Remay, and at the time she was the founding director of the Asian American collection at the Library of Congress. Mm-hmm. She introduced me to a wider community and to other influences, including Aileen and Luis A. Gloria.
Yes.
So I'm very fortunate, really, to have the mentors and the resources I was given, because they helped determine the course I wanted to take. And at this point, I think I'm a poet because I cannot not be one. So
too late now, Aileen.
Oh my God.
Poet laureate now.
How powerful is that? And just want to mention to the audience, that was Aileen speaking. I messed up and said Ivy. So just because, it's hard now. We got, different voices. So I just want to make mention of that. So, well, yeah. And you made a powerful statement. How can I not be? How can I not be a poet? It's hard to kind of. Yeah. It's a part of of your persona. Your being, your whole entire being. I can understand that. So. Also, another question for both of you. I'm going to get you guys straight here. So, for Ivy,
yes,
what are you working on now?
So, over the last month, between mid-February and mid-March, I was fortunate enough to have been awarded a Michael King Writers Centre residency here in New Zealand, in Devonport.
Congratulations!
Thank you. So I was given 4 weeks to write, which is obviously a wonderful chance to just focus on one's poetry, which is what I did. So over 28 days, I wrote poems for my next volume of Diaspora, which is Volume S. So
okay, and why is that Volume S?
I'm responding to Filipino idioms with letters that start with S.
S. Okay, gotcha.
As with Volume L, which all the idioms start with L. So
there you go. Okay, thanks for that clarification.
No. So yes, that's what I've been working on.
Great, and so. Just want to make sure, Aileen.
Okay.
So what are you working on? And before you answer that, what exactly is part of a poet laureate's duty? I've always wondered about that.
Oh, okay. So right now I'm working on a couple of Paloma Press projects. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I've also launched my campaign as Poet Laureate of San Mateo County. So a Poet Laureate is like an ambassador for the literary arts, which means you try to make poetry more accessible to people in their everyday lives. My campaign is titled Speak Poetry, and it's a way for me to get to know my communities, to find out what interests them. I'm very fortunate because the county has been very generous with the resources and support. And I'm collaborating with various groups, and we're organizing readings, poetry concerts, workshops, and other events throughout the year that are aimed at poetry advocacy, and also raising awareness on issues that are important to us. One project that affected me very deeply is the poetry class at the county jail. I read somewhere that to be a poet, you have to go through hell and back. Mm-hmm. And these inmates are in so many hells. Poetry offers them a kind of freedom that they otherwise don't have access to, and that's empowering. And from that, I've realized that poetry is a lesson in dignity because it helps you see so many possibilities, and it gives you hope.
So in essence, you are saving lives. Poetry saves lives. Wow, that's very touching and moving.
Before I didn't really. It's a very vague notion, but meeting the inmates and hearing their stories and their powerful poetry, and a lot of them were served in the military.
Uh-huh.
So it's heartbreaking, but also you cannot help but admire them for trying to rehabilitate and make an effort to rejoin their families and their
exactly.
communities.
And it kind of breaks that stigma, right? The stigma of, oh, you are all, you did bad, and you'll always be, you always looked down on, like you're never going to amount to anything, I'm sure. So, I mean, and this gives them, like you said, gives them hope, and an outlet. Right. Vehicle for expression and all that. So, wow, that's really touching and moving. Such fantastic work. And congratulations on that post. Seriously.
Oh, thanks.
Yes, congratulations, Aileen.
So, last question again for both of you. Begin with Ivy. Where did you get your inspiration and ideas? And do you have any set routines?
Oh, I mean, I am interested in so many things, and I write poems about so many things. I think I just learned, over the years to trust my intuition about what to write, especially with these idioms. I'm coming across these concepts that are, sometimes a little strange, but I kind of like strange. So I just write to what comes to my mind for that. Yeah, I think it's basically trusting my intuition to, give me the ideas and on what to write. And as far as set routines go, I tend to write of an afternoon, and I like to compose on my bed. So
see, that's really great. Afternoon, huh? Usually I hear like, early morning or late in the evening, but not afternoon. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I think my brain's warmed up by then.
There you go. Aileen, what about you?
Because I always have to work around my day job. Yeah. So I have to find the time to write early in the morning or late at night, or, while sitting in traffic. Right. I've never really required a view or a dedicated space. I find that my poems take shape when I'm doing something else. And inspiration comes from many different things, like nature, or articles that I read, or scenes that I see on the street, or memories from places I've called home at one point. So like I could be looking at the most gorgeous scenery outside my window, and then, my mind would be seeing and hearing something else, like another place's shape and spine and rhythm. Yeah. So I can relate. Yeah,
definitely. Wow, this was a very inspiring and touching session, I have to say. Ivy and Aileen, it's been great talking to both of you, learning more about you two. I wish you the very best of luck, and thank you for all the awesome things you are doing for Filipino American poetics throughout the diaspora. Keep being awesome, keep writing and publishing, and I hope our paths cross someday.
Thank you, Christina.
Thank you, Christina.
Thank you.
And I'll see you. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I found, this to be illuminating and fun.
Oh, I'm glad. Oh, and before we sign off, can you tell the audience your where they can find your work, your website?
Go ahead, Aileen.
Oh, it's AileenCassinetto.com.
Okay.
And I wanted to say it's an honor to be on your show, and that I'm looking forward to seeing you in October for the Filipino American book festival in San Francisco.
Yes, let's talk about that. Definitely. Oh my gosh, I look forward to that also. How about you, Ivy?
Oh, my website is www.ivyalvarez.com.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, everyone, that is it for now. Please tune in next week for my next featured guest. In the meantime, have an awesome, productive, and creative week. Bye, Ivy. Bye, Aileen.
Bye.
Bye, Christina.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.